Good morning and welcome again to another edition of the Culture Hour here on Mountain Stream TV. I'm Thomas Rain Crowe and my host Kelsey O'Donnell is with us this morning. Hi Kelsey, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Just fine. And our special guest this morning is William Shelton. William is a native of Jackson County. He is a farmer. He has also been on the board of county commissioners, among other things, politically here in our county. And so this morning we're going to talk about politics and farming and whatever else what might come up in the course of our conversation. So welcome, William.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, good to have you here. It's been a long time since I've been with you on television. Actually, this is the first. So
I think so.
But I've known you for a long time, and we've done a lot of different things together. Some years ago, we were kind of cohorts in getting you elected onto the Board of County Commissioners, and you were a commissioner for how many years?
4.
4 years, and then things changed, and now you're back on the land doing what you've been doing for a long time, is raising tomatoes and lettuce. And tell us a little bit about I'm curious about your as being a native of Jackson County, what the difference is between how things were when you were growing up and the way things are now, both culturally and politically. Yeah.
That's a broad question, but it's as different as night and day, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, the foundation is still there. From an agricultural standpoint, it's gone from mainly small subsistence farms, predominantly small tobacco farms with a few head of livestock and a big garden. And over time, back in the day, there was plenty of things produced locally to eat and to share. But when it came to marketing and the business side of it, that was somewhat limited, and it was hard to find outlets for products. So one advantage of now is with the local food movement. There's been a lot of outreach when it comes to marketing, and now the problem is not so much marketing as it is production. So
it's all about more, right? I mean, I've heard that in order to survive as a farmer in America, you've got to go big. Is that true?
Well, not necessarily big, but if not big, at least specialized. Mm. And you have to find a good something that you can produce in a fair quantity that's the right product and the right quality for your target market. Mm-hmm. If you can do that, the market is there.
Mm-hmm. What are you specializing in then? What is your focus now in terms of what you're growing and the market you're trying to tap into?
Well, I'm going to back up just a minute. Mm-hmm. Years ago, we were primarily livestock and tobacco, and I wasn't aware really of the health detriment of tobacco. I just grew up in this tobacco culture where everybody smoked. I never smoked. My family didn't smoke, but everywhere I went, people were smoking. And the tobacco was a strong industry, and we learned to work in the tobacco fields, and there was a sense of community in the whole tobacco production process, and we didn't realize how much damage we were doing to the health of the nation.
Well, I don't think it was you all necessarily.
Well,
to be fair,
we all had a part in it.
Yes.
But over time, I realized that I wanted to do something that was of health benefit. So I phased tobacco out, phased livestock out. With the livestock, the primary problem was waste and what do you do with all this manure and going into the streams and that kind of thing. So anyway, I switched over to fruits and vegetables, strawberries, which we've grown for now 30 plus years, tomatoes, which this is my 32nd season of growing tomatoes, and then we specialize in that part of it, the vine ripe and different types of tomatoes, and then we also do a hydroponic greenhouse that I've had for a long time that we raise Bib lettuce. for retail markets.
Right. You grow Mountain Majesty tomatoes, right?
Mountain Majesty tomatoes.
That's a specialty.
Yeah, well, it's a special. It's special in terms of it was bred to be produced in the mountains here in western North Carolina, and it was bred for flavor, which is something that a lot of commercial tomatoes, something that was lost along the way with a lot of the commercial production. The emphasis is more on shelf life, but now Randy Gardner, our breeder, well, he's retired now, but he's still working. He was an NC State breeder, came up with this mountain line, and he's always put focus on flavor because we have a special climate here in the mountains, and we have a little bit more temperate climate. It gets a little bit cooler at night than it does off the mountain, and we have limited soil, limited good farmland, but what we do have is really nutritious and good quality land. So with those factors, we knew that ultimately our market niche was going to be selling for flavor. And so he's been able to bring some of those shelf life qualities in and combine it with good flavor, and so that's what we market for.
Right. Well, just as coincidence would have it, in this week's Silver Herald, the lead story is exactly about what you're talking about, Randy Gardner and his breeding of these tomatoes. And this is a great picture of William's tomato field and a picture of him in the tomato field. It says, "Pioneering tomato breeder keeps locals on the land." And like I said, this is the lead story in this week's Silver Herald. So what are you going to do with all this fame and recognition?
Well, with everything else going on, it seems like they're hurting a little bit for news.
Well, going back just a little bit too, I know you went to the University of Tennessee and majored in agriculture, and our first conversation, as I remember it, we were talking about Wendell Berry. Mm-hmm. You were reading Wendell Berry's books, and I knew Wendell Berry and of course knew his work, and that was our first conversation.
He's still alive, right?
Yeah.
So you still know him, apparently.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Technically.
But where I was going with this was I remember our conversation being you were thinking maybe about going in a different direction, maybe not going back to the farm and doing what you're doing now, and going off and doing something else with your life. But then you started reading Wendell Berry, and he kind of pushed you back into the agricultural mind and the local community farming politics. And can you tell us a little bit about that transition and how that happened for you?
I don't know that it was a transition as much as just flipping the switch. Like in reading Wendell Berry, I felt like that it was getting me in touch with something that I already knew, but didn't necessarily know how to articulate. So that love of the land spoke to me in a way that said, if that's where your heart is, that's probably what you should be involved in. Mm-hmm. So it made it fairly simple for me, having grown up involved as I was in a subsistence agricultural setting. I think it would not have resonated with me so much had I grown up in a Atlanta suburb or in a steel town or something like that. But because I had, I kind of knew the sights, the smells, the taste mm-hmm. of what he was talking about, that really resonated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've gone on. I mean, here's another example. This is a Smoky Mountain News article that you and I did. Now we're dating ourselves on this one. This goes back, I'm reading here, well, I'm not
2001.
Sure, I'm not sure which year it is, but it goes back quite a ways. But there's a picture of William and his horse on his family farm. It's a much younger William, but it's hard to tell the difference. You look pretty much the same. But we did this interview and this article back when, and you've been doing it ever since, and in the meantime you've gotten involved in politics. Now I know your dad was on the water commission
Well, he was actually on the
sewer-
school board.
school
He
board.
was the school board and then was a state school board member. But he was always involved in agricultural aspects, committees and things of that nature. And so there's not a whole lot of full-time farmers numbers-wise in Jackson County. So the few of us that there are, by nature, you're going to be called upon to serve in various committees and things. So as soon as I graduated from college in '84, I was asked to serve on the Soil and Water Board of Supervisors. And so I took that and wound up being on that for 23 years. And during that time, several other committees, like the Farm Service Agency, County Committee, and things of that nature. But that kind of segued, the soil and water conservation aspect is what kind of segued into the county commissioner aspect.
What was the deciding factor for you to actually decide to run for county commissioner? What were the issues, or what was the reasoning behind your decision to do that, to run for office?
Well, I didn't feel like I chose it. I feel like it kind of chose me, because I remember when I first got on the Soil and Water Board back in '84, at that time we had a lot of erosion control issues that were primarily agricultural driven. Up in the southern end of the county, there were you might remember there were a lot of cabbage farms up in the Glenville, Norton area, and then over on Scaly, and there were a lot of big head-deep gullies of erosion and so at that time we worked on solutions for agricultural related erosion control. And at about that time, I remember Wayne Hooper was the chairman of the county commissioners, and we noticed that there was starting to become some erosion problems that were development related. And as we addressed agricultural, we felt like it was time then to look at what could potentially be the next big erosion control issue, and that would be the misuse of we needed to make sure that development roads and things of that nature were done in the right way, and in a way that reduced the amount of erosion, particularly because a lot of the people, the steep slope development was kind of new at the time, and if you hire a bulldozer and a track hoe to start up the side of a steep slope without the proper engineering and the proper drainage and the proper everything that's involved with that to stabilize the slope, you can run into some severe problems. So we approached Wayne Hooper at the time, and he understood and was sympathetic to what was going on. But at the time, Jackson County was, I guess we had the mentality then that we needed the development to bolster the economy, which is true. But at the time, we were more hungry for those dollars to come in than we were for environmental preservation.
Right, because there were no land use regulations in Jackson County.
No, none at all. And so at the time we decided the approach would not be, we would not push for anything regulatory, but that we would at the very least set up some type of education. So we put together a booklet on how to properly construct development roads and things like that, and actually invited construction people or the earth moving side of it to come out to the pancake barn and pass out some literature on how to properly do the roads, and we got met with some fairly decent responses, I recall. But then as time went on, it just became a flood of that, and so we kind of reached that tipping point where we needed to look at some land use regulations to help offset some of the poor construction that was going on.
And a lot of this was coming from out-of-state developers. I mean, that whole kind of flurry of gated community housing and second housing developments was really, I mean, because there was no land use regulations, Western North Carolina was like a bullseye for these developers. And they were coming in from Texas and Florida and Europe, and developing, you know, with the idea of high-end housing, and they had no regulations. They could do whatever they wanted to, and
They could.
So, and they did, and the streams were suffering, and that was a big issue, I think, at the time.
Well, and unfortunately, that became a polarizing issue when it seems like it could have happened in a peaceful way, but whenever you start to be a perceived threat to somebody's livelihood, there's quite a reaction, and there was when we eventually started with the land use regulations. And it's kind of unfortunate because on one hand, you know, if your politicians that are putting in some regulations, they're vilified from the development community, and then the backlash, then the developers become vilified by the environmental community. And the reality of it is, I think, is that these developers were coming in from parts unknown, and I don't want to vilify them, but educate them. It's like I don't want to assume that their intentions are bad, that they're coming here with the sole purpose of getting away with whatever they can get away with for the sake of a dollar. I tried to be reasonable and have the attitude that if we had this in place, then they would use that as an educational tool to do the right thing, with the assumption that they want to do the right thing to start with, if they knew what the right thing was. But unfortunately, these things become inflated, and you have to deal with that kind of fallout as well. And so that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, well, in the end, I mean, and to your credit and to the board at the time, I mean, in the election where you were elected to the board, it was an all local native board. Everybody on the board was from here, so you didn't have the real estate people that were from down east or somewhere else on the board, and you didn't have people representing necessarily the development and the developers. So in the end, Jackson County passed the strictest land use regulations in the state. Now, I don't know, it's been some years since that happened, whether or not they're still the strictest regulations, but they certainly were.
I'd say they probably are.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys really stepped up to the plate, and you hit a home run, as they said.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting, especially given, you know, the circumstances and the fact that Jackson County was becoming progressively conservative. It had always been for many, many years a Democratic county, but now it's clearly a Republican county in terms of recent elections. And what kind of problems does that represent for you as a former county commissioner and somebody who's involved and interested in politics, that shift?
Well, it's been somewhat painful because you know, as a native, I have a lot of respect for the people here, and I have faith that they want to do the right thing. I feel like some of the notions have become a little misguided. I think that there's been a lot of focus on big picture and national issues, and I think now it's pretty important that we kind of come to our senses on a local level and be more forward thinking and try to be more progressive in the way we approach our local county politics, because when there's a void at the top, which I think more and more people are beginning to see, that if you see crazy at the top, really the only thing you can do is turn in and start local and strengthen that local political scene, and then move from there outward, to the state, and then hopefully if you start on the local level, all politics are local, right? If you can if you can steer your local ship, then that eventually will turn the mothership.
And I think in a way too that it's starting local and doing that is a really good tool for getting involvement, because people, if you're like, okay, if there's people in a community who are angry about an issue and they're like, okay, I want to tackle this national issue, it's, yes, okay, we're the people and we have power, but it is very hard for a small community to feel like they can do something for this national issue. And so if you start local and you say, okay, there's an issue right here that I want to fix, let's fix it, and then you actually do fix it and you see it and you're like, oh, I have political power, I can do things. I'm not just some person in Western North Carolina that no one cares about, I can do this. And so I think that that's also just a great tool for getting political involvement, because that's part of the issue too. Like you said, when you see crazy at the top, it's kind of just like, what? Like, what do you, this is supposed to be the head of everything, what do you do? And so it becomes very easy to just give up. And so I think that focusing local now, especially when national so crazy, is a really, really good tool.
But I think you have to maintain some sense of optimism, and you have to, I can't go out here and pick a fight with everybody that disagrees with me.
Yeah.
I mean, I can, but I don't think ultimately that is productive. I think to walk your walk and to hold the space, just to hold that, coming right down to the personal level, hold that space for progress and for inclusion and for environment. If you look at it as a Venn diagram, what's at the center of that? It's people in place, and you can look at the planet and the sustainability and the ability to maintain our food supply. As a farmer, that's pretty important, and our clean water and the quality of the air we breathe, and those are the most fundamental elements. And it seems like now, with all the crazy, there's really no talk of environmental issues or sustainability. It's focused on a whole nother plane. And so I think that the mountain people that I'm one of, I think eventually, when the smoke clears and people start to begin to see through the BS, the propaganda, that they're gonna get back to what's real and what's true, and then they're gonna start acting accordingly and hopefully voting accordingly.
Right.
Like they say, when will people start realizing you can't eat money?
Right.
Can't do it.
Well, and there's a rumor
keep
going
warm.
around that you might be interested in running for Congress. Is
No.
there any truth in that?
No.
I think you should.
That's funny. Apparently that requires millions of dollars. So there you go.
So, what now do you see in Western North Carolina and Jackson County in particular, but here in the region that has your attention, that needs to be addressed in terms of righting the ship or balancing the ship? What are some of the issues that you're looking at that have your attention, or that you're concerned with, or maybe you're happy about? Or
Well, thanks for the softball question.
No one said this would be easy.
I'm so, I'm so focused on the day to day right now that I want to forward think. Obviously, right now, some of the national crazy, it's hard not to focus on locally, and that's the healthcare thing that's going on. I would love to see a sane resolution to that. I feel like it's coming. Maybe. I think that the it's almost like the Affordable Care Act was just sabotaged from the get-go. It's not as if it. I don't think it. I mean, I'm not saying it's not failing, but I don't think it's failing of its own accord. I think it's been pushed down the steps, and so I think now that it's become a fiasco, that if they get together and maybe the state of North Carolina could move ahead with Medicaid expansion and then start offering more, more choices outside of the Washington exchange, or that could right that ship to some degree. But healthcare is just completely freaked out right now, and everybody has their little health issues, and nobody wants to go to the doctor.
Well, that sort of leads me into a question that I wanted to ask you anyway about immigration, because most of your workforce is migrant labor.
You had to get me started on that.
Well, no. Well, it's an important issue for Jackson County, and it's an important issue for America in terms of the workforce, the people that are actually doing the on-the-ground work here in labor in our country, but especially here in the mountains. I live out in Tuckasegee, and a large portion of the population out there is Hispanic, and I relate to the Hispanic and the laborers every day in one level or another. So, and I know that you have a particular take on how you treat your working people, and tell us a little bit about how you do that and what's important to you and all that.
Well, I mean, I work with Hispanic people daily and have for the last 30 years, and I feel like I am a Hispanic. I mean, it's gotten to that point because I have a deep respect for their work ethic and their culture and who they are as people, and I don't think of them as apart from me, because it's like we're a codependent situation. Yeah, we have a very symbiotic relationship, and it to me it comes back to if it seems like we're looking for a solution in search, like we're trying to do a solution in search of a problem right now, because if you look at the reality of it, I think that there's a negative net. I mean, there's more people leaving to go to Mexico than there are coming from Mexico in the United States. And what I've seen, I think the rhetoric is dangerous when you start to just throw out words about, the Mexicans, or because, for example, I have a young man that works for me that I have witnessed him be profiled by local law enforcement, not Jackson County, but in Swain County. And the reality is he's an American. He was born in Ohio and raised in Florida, and he's, in my opinion, just as much of an American as you or me, yet because he speaks fluent Spanish, he can go from Spanish to English in one phrase and one thought, and that is a tremendous asset for him and me and my business. But he's very, he's proud of his Mexican heritage, and we eat great Mexican food, and we but he's an American, and I make fun of him for that, because he likes to say, "Hey, I'm a Mexican," and I'm like, Jorge, you're not a Mexican. You were born in Ohio. You're an American. So I think it's just dangerous to use the divisive rhetoric and to categorize people based on our our perception, our initial perception based on skin color or language. Or it's kind of interesting. I've been watching this documentary on New York this past week, and it's like an 8-part Rick Burns documentary on New York, and the just the diversity, the cultural diversity, and having been to New York and been in Little Italy and different parts of the city, and the presence of the Jewish community, and that is America. I mean, we are a
melting pot.
An amalgamation, is that a word?
Amalgamation, yeah.
Of different peoples and cultures, and did I use that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway.
Mr. Ryder.
Anyway, and having grown up here, I'm of English descent, Scots-Irish descent. I grew up with a lot of Cherokee friends, and then now the Hispanics, and that is who we are. And so, why be divisive?
It seems to be a kind of a negative trait in the human species. I mean, this whole idea of clannishness. I mean, if you look, all my people, not all, but as far back as we can trace, come from Scotland, and we all know about Scotland. I mean, they were just fighting with each other all the time. I mean, they were probably, within, all lived in the same county, but because they were this clan or that clan, they had to fight over something.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be the history of mankind seems to be that way. If you look globally and you go back thousands of years.
Well, it's the human condition.
Yes.
And I guess the bright side is, when you look at the United States, even the state we're in right now, we're very fortunate to not have any more violence than we have. I mean, sometimes I consider that, because I look around Jackson County, and I count. I mean, we have an incredible number of churches in this county, and I wonder how many of them are full, and so we have a diversity among this Christian base, where they don't all agree. They're fractioned and split and all over the map, and so we all find our niche of where we, based on our conditions, our heredity, our environment, our influence, and so I think we by nature splinter, and I think it says something positive for the human spirit that we, particularly in this country, that we have been able to splinter yet remain united to a degree. But that has occurred in my opinion, because of one thing, and that's separation of church and state, and the notion that we are free to believe what we choose and say what we choose and think what we choose and express, and if we take that away, then it's lights out.
Yeah, well, it seems like there's more and more integration of church and state politically and socially these days. Like, you go to the church out in Tuckasegee, where I live, and they've got a state flag and they've got an American flag out in front of the church. So, and then a lot of times there'll be the preacher in the pulpit will be talking politics.
Oh, yeah.
So
had that in my church as well.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's. It seems like there are plenty of things to talk about in a church of any denomination, to the exclusion of politics.
Oh, absolutely. Well, also, going back a little bit to what you're generally talking about, one, it's interesting, talking about, okay, that's Scots-Irish. Well, we used to be I'm Irish as well, in case you can tell from my freckles, and my last name. Irish people were the were the others. They were the migrant workers who were coming in, and you know, there's been so many. If you look at the history, it's like Italians or Jews or like all of these different groups that are now just part of this white community were all discriminated against because then they weren't white enough, because they weren't Anglo-Saxon. And so it's interesting to look at that, how that's still happening today, but now the people who were discriminated against are discriminating. But also a little bit of a question is, I'm from California, and so there's a ton of farms there, and there's a ton of migrant labor, especially from Mexico. And part of what people have been talking about is people complain about this and complain about them taking our jobs, but it's like, do you see other people who aren't migrant laborers coming in wanting to work on the farms? Is that what the jobs that they're looking for? Because that's one of the things, is people complain about these migrant laborers, but they're doing the jobs that Americans think that they're too good for at this point. And it's like, okay, so you want to shoo them all away, who's going to grow your food?
Yeah, well, agriculture, when it comes to fruits and vegetables, that would pretty well cease to be in the absence of Hispanic migrant workers. And well, not just Hispanics, but the other migrant workers. I wouldn't go so far as to say that Americans, you know, by and large think they're too good.
Well, yeah.
But I think that they are too out of shape, and they have too much. I think that their economic standards are higher than that could be satisfied through agricultural wages. And so part of that, you know, I hear some farmers, or I hear some people vilify agriculture because of bad treatment of migrant workers, and I'm sure that there are instances of that.
Yeah.
But in the food economy, I think everybody's complicit, because I know I personally pay my workers as much as I can possibly pay them and still meet my own debt service and obligations and things of that nature. So what ultimately drives that economy is the end consumer, and the expectation of it. When it comes to pricing, it's kind of a race to the bottom. And rightfully so to some degree, because there are so many people who don't have the income to, or in their, you know, the budget. But still, in this country, we have the cheapest food prices of any country in the world. But it's quite a dilemma. I mean, I see buskers sitting outside Earth Fair trying to scrape up enough money to be able to go in and shop at Earth Fair to buy, because they believe in buying organic or whatever. And so our food and our attitudes surrounding food, and it's all over the map. Because we're so well informed. I don't know if being well informed is to some degree you're more misinformed in some cases. But in terms of calories produced versus calories required versus calories consumed, I think farmers do a great job. I'm not going to sit here and put farmers down because I am one.
I remember you telling me, I don't know how many years ago it was, that you actually tried to incorporate some local labor into your workforce, but nobody wanted to work. I mean, you couldn't get local boys. Like when we grew up, we were always working. And I mean, especially in the summer, we had a job. And if we didn't have a job in the summer, we probably had something going on during the school year. I mean, we worked. And that's how we made our spending money or whatever it was. And apparently, young people here today just don't want to work.
Well, and I think some young people in their mind do want to work. I think that, I mean, I have 4 sons. I have 4 young sons, and I try to get them to work, and they will work. It seems like the problem today is maybe it was back then too, but when our main field preparation and planting season, school is still in session, because we start the middle of March and we're planting up, through the first part of May, through the end of May, and then they get out of school. Well, everything's already in the ground. And then we go on a maintenance schedule, and then we start really in the throes of harvest around, right now, the 1st of August, and it's time to go back to school. And so in the meantime, kids today seem to have so much on their schedules. They have specialized everything. And they fill their calendars with tennis camps and leadership camps, and all these things are great. But when does that happen? That happens during summer break. So we live in a busy world, and we short of necessity due to some catastrophic event, we're not going to go back to kids being on the land and working with their hands, and now they're doing a lot of this, and I have lamented about that, and I have worried about that, and I've, at the same time, if I take my kids in today's world and try to take that away from them, that technology, and put them out here picking potato beetles off of a potato vine, they're going to get left behind. And this, for better or worse, is the world we live in. And so they are going to live by technology and innovation and information, or they're going to die by it. But it's their experience to have, and it's their life. I can't live it for them. I can't.
So, what do you do in your time off? I know that you probably don't have any time off, but when you do have some time to yourself, what are some of the things that you like to do, or that you've been doing, in the last couple of years, maybe, or so?
Hike, fish, golf.
Those are 3 great things.
And the thing about that is, and I mean, I'm just so blessed to live in this area, and it's fortunate for me that I love it, because I can't stray far away from it because it requires my attention all the time. But I am 5 minutes from great hiking, and I'm 5 minutes from great fishing, and I'm 5 minutes from golf. So so I can seize moments.
And you've got all the Hispanic food you can eat right there on your farm.
Man, I eat great, and I can stand to miss a few meals, but we have a lot of good authentic food at our farm, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, Kelsey's going back to San Francisco here in a day or two, and we're going to miss Kelsey. At least I am. And so, what are you going to be doing in the next few weeks or the next month or so? What is your schedule in terms of the direction that you're moving in?
Hiking, not fishing and golf. I'm sorry. I play some golf. Fishing, I don't like killing things or hurting them. I don't eat fish. If I ate fish, I'd be okay with it, because then I'm recycling. But the catch and release, I don't like. Oh man, I'm just gonna be relaxing a little bit. As you sort of said, summer, and I so understand that. When I was in high school, I was busy from 8 in the morning until 6 or 7 at night. And then I got home, ate dinner, did my homework, and went to sleep. And I remember occasionally if I would go out and go to a movie or something and ask my parents for money, which is what kids do nowadays. That's how we get our spending money, is we ask our parents. My parents were like, well, go get a job. I'm like, oh yeah, with all of the time that I have, sure. You also want me to be in 5 AP classes and go to Duke, which I did. And so that's assuredly, I understand that. So now, and that I've had my job and been doing that, I can relax and read and write and play music and hike and do all those sorts of things.
And I know you're a biology major.
I am.
Among other things. And, how do you see that your major might dovetail with the kinds of things that William's been talking about? Do you see biology?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first off, I was so interested in the idea of the breeding and sort of genetic modification in a way. It's the scary, GMO is a scary thing, and I understand that, but that selective breeding is, that's how we created all of our dogs. That's how we did all this sort of stuff. And so it's just really interesting to see a small scale. It's not Monsanto doing this genetic modification for some scary reason. It's a scientist at a university doing it so tomatoes taste better. That's so interesting to me.
Well, that's been going on a long time.
Yeah, well, I know, but it's just, I just love that. And I think that there's so much, there's such a lack in the biology field of thinking about stuff like that, thinking about how important that is, how there's not just research to be done on the bottom of the ocean, there's research to be done on how to, most effectively take what Mother Nature is giving us and make it more beneficial for the larger masses. That's what evolution's about. It's about taking what you have and using it. So I think that there's, I don't get why more biologists and scientists don't get into farming and agriculture, I guess.
I could speak to that just a little bit. Number one, I think that there are a lot that are into agriculture. I think where we're losing out maybe a little bit is, I think what's vitally important as to move the ball forward in agriculture is the support of publicly funded land-based or land-grant universities, because that provides, the public funding of research provides unbiased research.
Yeah.
And so I think that right now, a lot of the research is corporate driven, corporate paid for.
Yeah.
And so the results sometimes benefit, So, and that's why the support of public universities and public education is so vital.
Yeah, definitely.
Because through that, I know that when I was younger, much younger, there seemed to be more extension-based through NC State or whatever the land-grant university may be, whether it be Tennessee or Georgia or so forth. More on-farm testing and more involvement between researchers and growers out on the land and that kind of thing. So as long as there is that foundation, I think that we have a chance to be okay in that regard.
Yeah.
But it seems like, well, one thing I've noticed when I go to, I'll go to an agricultural seminar, and you have usually a trade show involved with that. So the trade show, they pay for their spots to be there, and that helps finance the show or the seminar part. So you have classrooms where you're going in and learning the latest in disease control strategies or insect control or whatever the case may be. And so in here you may have a land-grant university professor, researcher giving you a talk on how to do these things, and it's being sponsored by a trade show next door. And as he might be in here saying, oh, well, this product doesn't really work in our trials. You see what I'm saying? So it all seems to work out as long as you have that
separation of the corporation and the science.
And the science,
Well, speaking of disciplines, I mean, a lot of what we talk about here on our show are the arts, and and I know you have some ideas about how you might proceed in terms of your own career, doing television that has to do with biology and that kind of thing, but How do you see the arts playing into this discussion in terms of a possible future, in terms of the environment and agriculture and that kind of thing? How do you, as a theater person and
Yeah.
someone who's avidly involved in the arts, what do you see? How does the arts play into this discussion?
Yeah. I feel like there's been this sort of art, or the way that I like to use the arts that I do, photography and acting and that sort of stuff, is in a way like not educational, but sort of to uncover something, to show something that people don't normally see. And I think that sort of what you've been talking about and what I've, as a young person, and there's been this sort of like mental movement away from farms. It's like I go to a grocery store and I buy an apple, but I don't think about the farm where it was grown or the people or the process or the, that's not as much. It's just sort of like, oh, it's just food. It just appears. I don't know. There's some farmers somewhere. And especially being in San Francisco and being in a big city where it's like, farms, what? And so I think that art could be such a great way to sort of bring back a public realization of the importance, the sort of how agriculture and food affects everybody. There's been, there's big movements, as you said, the organic movement and the looking at the GMO and looking what's in your food and how it affects you and all sorts of stuff. And I think that there's this really weird relationship with food that people have. It's not just fuel anymore, but it's also it's not like this very expensive, in a lot of ways, commodity. Fruits and vegetables are so much more expensive than going to McDonald's and getting a burger, obviously. And so I think that it could be a really good educational tool, especially for people in cities and stuff like that, for like you said, without the huge catastrophe coming, kids aren't going to keep going on farms, and that's not going to re-happen. We're not going to move back. But I think there is a movement for like people having their own little gardens and city gardens and stuff like that, and realizing that sort of bringing back to the land and growing something yourself and how that can affect you. And I think that art could be a really good tool to sort of help bring that about.
So can we look forward to the Kelsey O'Donnell Hour on ABC TV in a few years?
Sure, yeah.
Is this what we're talking about here?
I could offer a suggestion.
Be my
Please.
guest.
Well, as a farmer and seeing what you're talking about, I've noticed that tell me if this is a word, the gentrification
Yes.
of food, and yeah.
Oh yeah.
So what I would like to see somebody do through art, music, communications, TV, something, is to do anything to bridge the gap between to bridge this the divide between, or to somehow help heal the disconnect between farms and farmers and end users, because there is so much out there that chips away at trust, at the public perception. There's so many things that could be addressed, so many of these issues that could be addressed through that venue to help bring better understanding between consumers and farmers. Because the divide is huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, on that note, our hour is just about ended, and so I just wanted to thank you, William, for coming in and being a part of our show here on Mountain Stream TV.
I appreciate
and taking the time away. I know you're busy this time of year, and so your time is valuable. So I appreciate you coming in and talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Kelsey, it's been so much fun having you as my co-host.
Thank you.
For the last month or so, and I hope you have a good rest of your summer and
Thank
enjoy San Francisco. And
Thank
then
you.
You'll be back in North Carolina in
I
a few
will.
weeks at
Yep.
Duke, and we'll look forward to keeping up with you. I hope you'll stay in touch with us.
Of course.
And come back whenever you want.
Oh, I will.
Well, maybe we'll have you as our special guest
That would be
for one of our shows in the fall or the winter or something.
Yeah.
So
It's hard to stay away from these mountains.
yes.
Especially on a day like this.
Right.
Yeah.
And thank all of you for watching, and please join us again every Friday morning at 10 o'clock, once a month, the first Friday of every month at 10 o'clock for the Culture Hour here on Mountain Stream TV.